and the end of the written word, because that was the time when TV was really kind of coming up in a big way, and how TV is going to kill print, and this will be the end of the print journalism as we knew it. And here I am, it's 30 years later, and print seems to be still holding up. But yes, I mean, the Sunday magazine did shut down, though for various other reasons. Not it was not really about readership, really. So so that's the journey we've all traveled, and we've all heard this so many times that this is the demise of something, this is the birth of another. It's but I after a long time, in like I said, about 30 years, it seems that there is space actually for all kinds of things. There is print, there is online, there is TV, there is podcast. In fact, some of the older forms of journalism and reporting are maybe getting revived. Radio, which was almost non-existent when I was starting my career. Now it's come back in the form of podcasts. At least if not radio and how we knew it, but the audio journalism. So I think it just ebbs and flows. It's nothing really ever dies. I mean, the basic thing of a journalist's profession, to go to a place, find out about a story, come back and tell it to his or her readers. I mean, that I really don't think will ever change. The forms may change, and I mean, this is, like I said, I mean, since I've been at it for a long time, these are some of my views. I know you guys are much younger and have started much later, and I don't know how. So Neha, so when you started, let's say, TV was at its peak, right? And you have done a lot of TV work in terms of, but not television and news TV, but audio visual documentaries and. I know those two. So you must have also heard this, that this one is ending, the other is starting, but it really never is that way, right? I mean, they're all happening parallelly, and of course, like I said, sometimes go down, another come up, but another comes up, but it just ebbs and flows.
Thank you, Satish. I have done TV for 2 years, and that is when I realized what I definitely don't want to do in life. Okay. So that is my experience of TV. But essentially, I started out with a magazine. I used to work with a magazine called Tehelka, and then I moved to TV. I've done long formats, but I want to say that this was the journalism that I studied as a course. It was called convergent journalism. This was a time when, earlier there were these journalism courses which are print journalism or TV or something like that. But this was a time when they started teaching convergent journalism, which meant that you have to know all possible mediums. So which meant my training as a journalist was both for, it was for print, for television broadcast. We were taught radio then. Now it's of course useful as podcast. So radio broadcasting, and of course web. So to be able to tell stories, and the same story and different element of the story in various multimedia formats is what my training was. And that is, but when I've been a journalist for 18 years now, but when one looks at it, it seems that you can never say something's going to die out. The form may change. So now, for example, we don't say TV journalism, but we say YouTube journalism, right? Yeah. So it is the same video format that works. So, for example, radio journalism, we never had journalism per se in terms of radio, but we had radio broadcast. But that is now as podcast everywhere available. So the possibility of telling stories in different formats is definitely there, and that training is helpful. For example, for me, I realized that I was doing a lot of long form reporting, and like one talks about it now, that all of us sitting here and at some point have taught students, have realized that they don't really read, or they're looking at those stories or reels. But basically, I realized that, for example, when I did graphic nonfiction, so I collaborated with some artists, and the same story, when it was told in a graphic format, the same students would actually look at it. So there's a possibility now, I think of looking at various formats and finding which format can tell the story better. And the same thing, you're talking about death of print, for example, or death of long form. yes, lots of us are wasting our time watching reels, but at the same time, lots of people are also binge watching. So
Correct.
there's no never a depth of long form.
Yeah.
So there are ways in which things can be said and can be replicated, and I think that's where we can't rule out anything, but to be able to tell different formats and different elements of a story in a different way.
So I could, if both Arunava and Shaukat, actually, they, the insights that you get from teaching, from the students, it's always said that, as from morning also, so many sessions, everybody has said that attention span is zero, reading habits are nil. Shashi Tharoor in the morning was saying that how his sons who are into journalism feel that they might be the last generation who take up journalism, at least as we know it. Could be just, may well be this 1 minute, 2 minute clip kind of journalism. So, when you're teaching, I mean, especially literature, and, urging students to like really read in depth, what is it that you get from them? And is it really dying? I mean, don't they want to read?
So one thing I'm often asked that how do you do scholarly writing as well as kind of imaginative writing, how you teach, how do you do different things? And one thing I always tell my students that it's actually journalism which helped me bridge these different spaces. And I'm not a real journalist like Neha or Satish, or I think Ornabu has also been running Scroll, though off late he's come over to our side, But I think the reason is that, I dwell in the op-ed space. Mostly my work is in op-eds and in literary sections and magazines, as opposed to the kind of real world reporting say Neha does. And what I find interesting is, it's a kind of a bringing together an intensely personal voice on a very public matter. And that is what makes it interesting, that often I find the most compelling stories open with a first person. Oh, I did this. Oh, on that day, I was walking through, and people love the I. And this is something I tell students that, people love to hear particular. That's why the arts are unique. The arts tell a particular story. But then once you get them through that I, you go into a public issue. You go into an issue of public, whether it's religion, whether it's education, whether it's something. But in a way, it's really writing these things that has given me a voice. That I have found my voice, that unique, that I can now talk about it. And now it's like, I was telling in the morning and yesterday that, Virginia Woolf writing a book review. I mean, she's writing a book review, but she's really writing about herself. The book review, the archive is kind of an excuse to project it. And it's not like that. I think real journalism is also about effacing that. But I think that's something I keep telling students. And what's interesting about reading, I think students are not necessarily reading less, they're reading differently. Because one thing we know, that this explosion of content, when they face a 300 page or a 400 page book, the anxiety often is, do I need to spend like the days I need on this book? Oh, how many articles could I have read? Of course, not to say how many reels I could have seen, but there's a sense that I can pack more into my time. There's a constant sense of anxiety. The whole idea of devoting like a month to this amazing novel, that is what under thread. So, but if you actually study, I think in terms of volume, they're reading a lot.
No, but that's true. I mean, there is this fear, but actually, if you see the same month, they would have spent looking at reels or whatever else they do, right? I mean, it may not be engaging with one book. I mean, in the sense that the minute you start seeing something like reels or shorts, etc., I mean, you don't know how the hours pass. It's like, I mean, you could actually finish a couple of chapters of a book in that time. It's not, I mean, the reels may be short, but the time spent on it, and also just sort of unmindfully, as in in the sense, it's just, that's quite a lot. I mean, like a couple of hours reading a day is, I think, pretty good for a reading person, right? I mean, I'm sure all of us spend a couple of hours a day on reels.
It depends why you read. I think you read for pleasure.
Yeah.
and then you read to look smart.
Yeah.
You're reading to pick up the subject for the conversation at parties. Oh,
Yeah.
I read this, I read did that, talking about. And increasingly I find that, 7 8 years ago I'd go to Litfest and people will say, oh, I read this article you wrote that day, and now it's like, oh, I watched that YouTube video you talked
Yeah.
about. And I think Neha was talking about that exactly. I think certain fundamental things, whether it's story, human interest, they will not change. The technology will keep changing. The technology, the format will keep. The problem is with some of us who are in love with certain medium. I'm not so much interested in a story as in a novel. And a novel doesn't have to be a story. It can be a story or it doesn't have to be a story. But it has a certain relationship with language. I want to write an op-ed, or I want to write a literature.
So yeah, the medium itself does not preclude form. It can be long form, it can be a quick, tight report piece or reportage. It can be a multi-installment piece going deep into something. The real problem with the online medium is that it's very hard to create an online brand where you say, I read the New York Times, or I read the Washington Post, or I read the Times of India. Here you read whatever your feed throws up, whatever your friends are sharing with you, whatever your social media is showing up at you. It's not many people who actually say, I will go to scroll.in or the wire.in or the newsminute.com and actually see, okay, what have you got today? Let me see what's worth reading. Yeah, but not many. Not many. Unlike the newspaper, where you actually picked up the newspaper not because of what specific pieces, but you would go through it and decide what to read. So as a result, many, and because of the business model, because if you're online, unless you're getting the reach, so what happened was that because your reach is enormous, in theory, anyone in the world can reach you. Many people who started online versions or unique online newspapers said that we'll keep it free for readers and we'll use advertising. The trouble with advertising online is that the rates are very low. You can't charge the kind of rates that you do in newspapers and magazines. So you need lots of people to come and read. So eyeballs, as they say. And the moment you got into that game, you started playing cheap tricks to try and get the eyeballs, right? So the whole thing degenerated. So in the first generation of the online versions of newspapers, Times of India, Hindustan Times, whatever you call it, this became the game. It no longer remained journalism. So the whole online medium itself suffered a blow as far as credibility was concerned. New York Times or the Washington Post continue, or the Economist continue doggedly to do really good stuff, and they told readers you have to pay for this. And it took the New York Times 10 years to get people to pay enough to actually turn the online model into a profitable one. But once they got there, they got to a point where now their online play became more profitable than their print version. Now it's another matter that New York Times has become a gaming company. its largest audience now plays games, starting with Squirtle and so on. Yeah, starting with all of them. But so that it was the second wave, as it were, that led to the scrolls and wires and news minutes and so on. Who said we can still do old-fashioned, good, solid journalism, but we will drop the cost structures of the print media, which are expensive both in terms of actually printing copies and also even more expensive in terms of getting them into the hands of people. But distribution is a very expensive thing, right? Whereas you don't need to do that. You go online and anybody can come to you. Different thing that they have to come to you. You can't do that. So therefore, you are playing with smaller leadership. Yeah. The other trouble that has happened is that people have started thinking of learning about the world through hot takes. No longer do the majority of people want to get into the information, the analysis, and come to conclusions for themselves. They want someone to package it for them, ideally in as quick a dose as possible. And it is no coincidence that Instagram called the unit stories, which is the word, as you know, journalists use for their pieces, right? There were stories. Now your stories are up there. You also use stories. You also use stories. Yeah. But that is where people think they're actually learning about the world. And what they're replacing depth with width. In the space of 5 minutes, you get to see 25 different hot takes on many subjects, and you consider yourself very well informed. Right?
But it's a good time to ask you a question.
Yeah.
Because you have been managing Outlook. And Outlook is now as a web press. But I think Outlook is still thought of primarily as a print magazine. And I think since I've been with you for quite a few years, and I see that kind of traction your print magazine gets, your online doesn't quite get it.
So this is exactly
the problem that we are trying to tackle. The print magazine, the Outlook magazine, has this identity. A person yeah, a kind of a voice also. Either a subscriber or a person who goes out to buy the print magazine. I mean, he or she knows what it.
once you're on the website, then you're competing with all the names, millions of viewers. So also, yeah, very vibrant. Yeah. So here, this is what we're trying to achieve: how to sync, the online, the website, more and more with the max. The building like it's happened quite a bit now, and but the problem, the difference between these two models. One is, go for the numbers. You put your reels, you put your shorts, and etc., and you get, something goes viral, and that your day is done for that day. But this thing of getting, what should I say, and this this is where the problem is, where how the is the ads of, the other, see, we are all completely slaves to this thing. I mean, the ads are not coming because we are, through our effort, it's what we are driven in some ways. The tech companies, right? And for that, they need numbers. So they are not looking at the quality of the article. They're not looking at, they're not looking at it. It's just very, very hard number. They don't care how well it's written. The little nuances that are still, so much. I'm sure all of you agree to get a sentence right, to get that flow happening, that really gets. And I mean, no, I'm saying in this model. Yeah. So this is where, websites and in India right now, is it viable? Sort of carry on with the staff expenditure.
You have to make it viable by injecting funds from multiple sources. So a big one increasingly is becoming big one increasingly is becoming models where readers pay. Readers either pay for having access to the entire site, which today, let's say, a Hindu does for you, other than a few articles. Or they support you because they feel that you're doing fine journalism, and they feel that you must be empowered to continue to do it. So, and then the third is that you sometimes get some funding. Somebody says, I would like to sponsor a series on, say, the environment, and so you get some funding that way, right? But the ones that are most successful with this model are the ones that are very narrow focus. For example, you have this two morning newsletters, the Ken and the Morning Dispatch, I think it's called, both of which are focused on the startup ecosystem, and they charge you to read their stuff. And because people who are interested in startups are in it to make money themselves, they don't mind. I mean, they actually consider it an investment to stay on top of the information. But knowing about what's going on in the world is not a financial investment. Or in your country, right? It's to be a different kind of person. And you may not need to be that person anymore. And as everybody knows, the pressure from advertising anyway is not just because of the numbers, but also, I will not go into details here, but you know that you have to say the right things.
Absolutely.
In order for big advertisers to use your medium.
No, and the other, slightly disappointing aspect of what we encountered also is, when it comes to, I think we started with, a paywall for 1 rupee, for 5 rupees. But it's incredible how, you go to a film hall and you buy a coffee or a popcorn or something, and nobody really, but this 5 rupees, it's such a barrier, people will not give even that for that was a bit of a disappointing thing that we had. Maybe it'll change, over time now with us.
You get things for free, like books.
See, that is the thing.
All the books are on PDF, so why have to buy it? We are like, okay, fine. As long as we are being read, I don't care if I'm getting.
That's the thing. So even the same story that we, if you put a paywall, they can go elsewhere and it's completely free. So that's what that's the thing. I wanted to ask Neha. She was saying that it's been about 18 years that you've been into real field reporting. From the ground, from the voices that we don't hear often, the not so powerful, in this, so what would you say that, the social media, the YouTube channels, and, it has in some ways also democratized journalism. Anybody can, start their channel, report from a very, very far-flung place about the problems they face. Of course, here the one issue is about some kind of editorship, some kind of editing of what is going on. But still, hasn't it also, democratized reporting?
So in a way, I would say, I'll give an example. In 2022, I was during the UP elections, I was in a village in Azamgarh. And this old person in this village walked up to me and asked me, "Are you a YouTuber?" So I said, "No, I'm a journalist." And so he turns around and says, "Tab main aapse baat nahi karunga." Nah, so then I'll not talk to you. And that says so much about the credibility of journalists and how much they trust YouTubers. So having said that, but we also need to look at the larger revenue model of the corporate media, right? So what is happening is that a lot of corporate legacy news organizations, mainstream organizations, used to have news bureaus, but and various states, and they shut them down as a cost-cutting measure and instead outsource that reporting to freelancers. So now what happens is that, of course, you're saving money, but you're also paying a reporter in Shamli or a reporter in Azamgarh 800 rupees for a story that person is filing. So what happens is, obviously, you cannot live on that money. So which means you're doing 4 or 5 other things on the site, which will have a lot of, without any judgment, it will have ethical issues, it will have moral issues, it will have credibility issues. But because this person has to survive, they will do work for the local politician also, they'll do work for someone else, and they will do that reporting. So what happens is, absolutely, internet has definitely democratized in the sense that we see a lot of news organizations that are focused on certain districts and they report on those areas. The people know those people. the same journalists who are reporting on these YouTube channels. So they know that they're reporting their issues, and once in a while, if they report something which is shady, they will go and tell that person. So there, the trust is building. The other thing also is that there's a lot of conversation about how India has a high population of neoliterates, which means that when they want to look at reporting, or when they want to hear something about their areas or the things that they're interested in, they want to do that in their own language, which is why anything that is getting written in English is hitting a plateau, and a lot of local languages and is are being represented and spoken of and reported in YouTube. So that is definitely happening. But at the same time, coming back to what you said, that the whole structure to support this is a problem, or the fact that now, because 2024 elections were called YouTube elections, so which is why a lot of people who were reporting the YouTube channels have been pulled down without notice. There have been changes that are being made in the IT laws and all of those censorship things. So there's clearly a reason why that journalism that is being put out on YouTube is has a huge impact on the politics of this country, and which is why that crackdown is happening. But at the same time, we are again at the mercy of Google, which one day your YouTube channel is gone and you don't know how to address it. So there are all these things that we have to look at. We have to look at money, we have to look at corporate political nexus, we have to look at the revenue model, and also to ensure how those journalists reporting for those YouTube channels can do it in a free, fair manner with enough resources to protect themselves.
So as a since you teach literature, I mean, for in the writing part, so when there's so much of the visual medium, the predominance of it, and as you said, it's reels and YouTube, and so the students, I mean, what do you get from them? Is there a, like, say, over the years, as you've taught, this can be, we can all say in our own career lives, I mean, this is like a, say, 5-6 year old, when it's year old phenomena, when it's truly taken over. So there are phases, right? I mean, you can say that it's maybe 10 years at the most, but not even really. I mean, it's the last 6 years. So since you've been teaching, so I just wanted to, we're curious to know what is it that you get from the students?
Yeah. So when I teach creative writing, say I teach literature as well as in creative writing. And one of the things is to challenge is to, as I was saying, to kind of balance that personal voice. You get students who are like, oh, this is all about my life. This is my life is on. And then there are students who are like, oh, I'm just going to talk about phenomenon. I'm too shy to talk about myself. And I think that the trick is to find that delicate balance, that you will talk about yourself, but you'll also talk about the world. And as I say, the writers are great narcissists, but their narcissism is redeemed by the fact that their narcissism includes the world. You are interested in the self, but you also see the world in yourself. So the self-world binary is deconstructed. I'll give you an example in terms of one of the, I think one of the op-ed pieces I wrote in the last few years, which had the most impact, was something I wrote during COVID. And this was about bodies. I wrote about what happens to burials. Like in all cultures, when somebody dies, how the dead body is treated is very important. And I give the example of Antigone, I give the example of, Anantamurti's Samskara. But then I also talk about my own parents. So I lost both my parents when I was in my 20s, and they were in their 50s, and I was in the US, and I couldn't come to see them. And so I couldn't say goodbye. I mean, it was like, and I decided it's too much for me because they're dead, and a lot of family traumas also. So they both died. And then I brought it back to COVID. Like, this is happening right now. So obviously I lost so much family so early that I wasn't, in that sense, I don't have to keep my phone up when I'm sleeping, because there'll be nobody calling me anymore. The people who would have called are already gone. So I'm kind of have this strange kind of post peace. But then I saw people, I'm like in Delhi, our old landlord, we got very close to him, and he died. We were in Basant. I was your neighbor at the time. It was in a different block, but we couldn't go, because that's the strange feeling, like you die, but you're completely disembodied. And I thought that really people wrote to me like, oh my God, this is so moving. I've seen somebody I've lost by cancer, somebody I've lost this. And I think this is the important thing. People are still moved by emotions. You know, we live in a world where it's kind of strange. Like we talk of, people are still voting for emotions. People are not looking at economic data. People are not looking at scientific phenomenon, but people are still going by emotions. And that's, sometimes I feel it's terrible. As somebody who deals in the humanities, I say that I don't want this gift, this victory for the humanities. Vote for the economists, go for economics. But that's the reality. And I think that when you write or when you teach students, it's to think about how you can unleash the tremendous power of the emotion. It is actually quite destructive. It can be quite destructive, it can be quite constructive. And for students to balance that voice is what I try to teach them. That, you know, it's neither all about me nor all about the world. Is to see the world in myself and to see myself in the world. If you can do that, then you've become the kind of writer who can actually move the world. And that is, I think, that is really important. So that's something I.
That's the, in fact, I would just wanted to ask Arunava, there's a good sort of lead that Saikat has given. This piece that he's talking about. We use this long form journalism in a very loose manner, in a very sledgehammer, sort of, it's this long form, and in the sense that half the things, frankly, a lot of things that I read, which is very long form, while reading, I feel that it could have been cut in half. In the sense that it's become long form for the sake of being long form. It's just sort of so in the digital sphere that you've dealt with. What are the is there would you like to sort of distill these things a little bit as to what does this long form entail? What are the kind of pieces, as Shaukat was saying, which which get more traction? Are there personal stories of writers? I'm not to say that one is better than the other or something, but or are they long ground reports from journalistic articles? So this long form, would you if you could maybe sort of untangle it a little bit?
Okay, I'm not sure that I am an authority on this.
No, as a reader,
But see, the one thing I always feel is that journalism is about finding out what somebody's trying to hide. That is more so today when the surface is easily available. We know what happened, but we don't know what really happened. Case in point, yesterday there was a story that a huge amount of cash had been found in the home of a Delhi High Court judge.
Yeah.
Did it happen? According to firemen who were there, they saw the cash. A few hours later, there was a report saying no cash was seen. Yeah. Now, someone is trying to hide something, right? Either there was cash and someone's trying to hide that fact, or there was no cash and someone is trying to hide the fact that there was no cash. Now, none of what we've read so far is journalism. We've just read a reproduction of what various people have said. Yeah. And those various people may be saying things for various reasons. None of it needs to approximate the truth even, let alone get to the truth. So, yeah, the truth is becoming increasingly elusive. And you can no longer pin it down to small incidents. Everything, you'll find something happened before, something has happened, something might happen as a result of this. And that is where a truly long view of everything comes in, right? So that to me is what deserves long form writing. Long form is not, it's not about the writer inserting themselves to the point where they become the story, right? If you remember, all of you, at least Satish, you will certainly remember when Gonzo and others began this form of new journalism, Tom Wolfe, Hunter Thompson, Michael Hurd, and they inserted themselves in the story, but it wasn't about themselves. Yeah. They were just showing you a point of view from which they were describing what was going on, and it added more power to the descriptions, but they weren't trying to tell you, hey, this is just me seeing things. Yeah. It was very much about, this is what is happening, but the camera is on my shoulder. Exactly what documentaries do today. Yeah. Perspective, right? What Shoikat was talking about. See yourself in the world, but see the world in yourself. But much of so-called long form is just fancy writing. Yeah, that's. And as you said, it does not hold the reader's interest.
And so and in your views, in say something like Scroll, etc. There are these pure opinion pieces where it's somebody is writing about something which an expert or non-expert, they're still writing about it. So in that, which are the ones I mean, I'm just curious as to which are the ones say the younger readers are more interested in. What does well?
Well, we don't know younger or older because we can't, we don't know the demographics of our readers down to each individual piece. But what is most read is what affects people the most. So, for example, health, okay, fitness, food. So, people are, they consume more of what affects them as individuals. I think that what used to be the traditional area of news, politics, society, and of course sports and films and books and so on, have moved a little further back now, and people have become more concerned with their well-being. They're less worried about being informed about the world, and that perhaps is because they find that they can get by perfectly well without knowing much about the world. It's like books. You can get by perfectly well without reading a book in your entire life.
Yeah.
So then, you have to persuade someone to read a book. It becomes a category challenge. News has become a bit of a category challenge in that respect.
Neha, this on the long form journalism, would you like to, since you've done, a lot of it.
in defense of
No. I'm not against it. I'm just saying that, it's kind of used very loosely. I mean, in the sense that, not the kind of journalism that you do, which in fact, perhaps needs more space and more time than that is given to you. I mean, I would say it should be even longer than, but a lot of it is also, it just becomes a stylish thing to say that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, adding to what Arunava said, see, both of you said was how a lot of pieces don't need to be that long, and I agree with that. But having worked as a reporter who does long form writing a lot of times, I also want to say that this is also a time where a lot of, like, I've done long form pieces for organizations that would work with me on that story and do 5, 6, 7 drafts to cut it to the point where it does not drag any longer. What has also happened is, because there is a resource crunch and because there is cost cutting, what happens is that there are no people on the desk.
Yeah.
So when you file 13,000 words, and it has happened to me, I had done an investigation and I filed 13,000 words and I sent it at 11 o'clock. And this editor says, yeah, we're going to publish it at 2 p.m. And I said, please stop. And then I had to ask some friends to read it and tell me what I was lacking. So that is a big challenge. So the times when probably a few years back, when there was good solid copy editing,
that's a good
several
point.
drafts, fact checking was done, you were told how to make the story better, get more angles, that sort of investment in the story does not happen because there's always this rush to publish. So that's one of the challenges. The other bit also is that, for example, a lot of reporting for me, like in the book, I don't see the possibility of having published a piece that would help me write about, like, Saida, there is urban poverty, there's migration, there is majoritarianism, there's also labor. So there's no possibility of doing those pieces any longer. Like for me, when I wrote Mayawati's profile for Caravan, things that I understood, of course, there was a lot of stuff written about Mayawati, but it was not she said, he said sort of a thing.
Yeah.
And like now, when you see, for example, because she was paranoid about her security, there were all these stories about her, that how she does not like the birds chirping. And then you realize basically there are no windows, and it's like a fortress that she's built because she's paranoid about her security. So possibility of writing these things in one story, or the fact that now a lot of reporting, for example, is only done around crime. And crime, when it's reported, it's often the press release, often the police version, often never checking what is happening. Or what Saikat was saying, that right now, in times when we're living in the age of disinformation, we're living in the age of propaganda. Propaganda is driven by emotions. And so in the post-truth world where propaganda is driven by emotions, no matter how much evidence and facts you present, there's no possibility of changing people's views. Then in a long form format, you can actually speak about what is it that this person is feeling when there is, for example, not getting daily wage is an economic issue, but also how does that impact a family psychologically, and how what decisions they make. So there's possibility of writing those things. Or if I'm writing Akhilesh Yadav's profile and somebody is telling me that in a meeting of bureaucrats, Akhilesh Yadav often reads out all the WhatsApp jokes that comes to his BlackBerry. So then that really tells me what this chief minister is thinking about what is that. So there is possibility of writing those things. So, but having said that, there are not enough people invested in making that story better.
Yeah, yeah. In fact, that is. Are you guys here to go now? Okay, so we'll just like one last thing. But it's an observation, really, not a question. But to what Arena was. Oh yeah, please ask. It's fine.
I'll be now.
Yeah.
So I was a professional journalist for a time. So and I wanted to tee off this point that was mentioned but probably not discussed at length: democratizing journalism. I feel that the fastest way to kill a profession is to democratize it. What if everybody starts practicing medicine? What if everybody starts practicing law? What happens to doctors and lawyers? So why should journalism be democratized? Because at the end of the day, I feel, and this is an observation, you can please respond. At the end of the day, all it serves to do is make the professional journalist even more precarious. That you can be substituted either by, as you have given an example, by a stringer sitting in a rural district who can be paid 800 rupees for a report, or the grandson or the granddaughter of a proprietor who comes over and takes over an important interview because Bill Gates is coming to my paper, so I must take the interview. If Gayatri Spivak is coming, then I must take the interview. All it serves to do from both ends is to make the professional journalist more vulnerable. So what do you say to that?
Maxwell.
I completely understand what you're saying, but I just want to say a lot of us here sitting, we are still making distinction between journalists and say influencers. But the people in general are no longer making that distinction. So it's a really big crisis. So if I am reporting something, that's okay. But if I'm not putting out workout videos or sari videos, then and I don't have followers, nobody is going to let me do anything. So that's how it has become. So the market and the challenge of it is also something that we need to look at. Democratization, of course, everybody should be able to report or at least question. But like what you're saying, if the foundation has been laid where credibility, basic fact checking, basic work that needs to go into reporting is not required any longer, then that's a huge challenge. So there are two things.
And-
Influencers, people, I mean, everybody is looking at explainer videos by Dhruv Rathi. He says he's not a journalist, but that is what people are looking at. So we can't control that any longer.
And there are various variations of this, but it is said that journalism is the last resort of the scoundrel. So unfortunately, I can't become a doctor or do an operation, or I can't go and fight a case in the court, or I can't build a bridge or a road, but I can write, I can report. So anybody is a journalist, everybody is a journalist, in some way. So there is that. In the democratization process, there is that barrier in the other professions which journalism doesn't really have. There are variations to this.
Yeah. But I think you also can't conclude the thoughts on this question because without that reference to AI, because AI is going to become completely pervasive, and the question will be what can be done by AI and what cannot be, and that's also a scale question because AI, they're saying, will eventually do everything human beings do, but they'll be able to do certain things first and certain things fall later, and that's the question. So I think that applies to everything: writing, journalism, and as far as I can see, that gathering data, checking things, those are the things AI can do pretty quickly. Now where I am having a unique personal voice, that is something which AI, I think it'll take it much later. If it comes to that, that'll be the last thing. As I think Hariri says this quite well in his book Nexus, that you can think of intelligence without consciousness. It's super intelligent, but no consciousness. It's like the body. And I think AI, we have to think of AI that way. It's very intelligent. And I think that's where writing a voice needs a consciousness. It needs feelings. And that, till you get that fact is going to be there.
And also the grandson and both AI cannot do ground reporting. So
Yeah. I think there were some more questions. You could please pass the mics. Or you could just ask.
I have a quick, small observation. I used to be a journalist very briefly, and there was a discussion on truth. And I was a reporter, and I felt that in my pieces, I used to entertain because I used to write, I needed to write that way. But truth, I felt, is something that journalism doesn't capture very well because you don't get time. You need to go, in the evening, you have to find your report. So I feel that truth, fiction is a better, I feel. Fiction is a much better avenue for truth.
That's sure. That's yeah. Go on. Go ahead. You can just ask. I don't think these are
yeah,
working.
go ahead. Yeah.
So I have a very specific question. You were talking about mediums in journalism. Why do print journalists have looked down upon all the,
They looked out upon them.
Yeah, I mean, people write online, right? So like, I have faced it, man.
No, as opposed to TV journalists.
No, they look down upon people who write online, right? When you go to an interview, right? If you have a print profile,
Oh, that-
then
sorry.
that is very strong.
Okay.
If you have an online profile, because when I was born, online for me, I mean, that was in. So I got into online. So whenever I have tried to, shift to print or write for print, they do have this, feeling that she's from online.
Okay.
This thing, okay. So yeah, it's not about me, it's about everyone. I think everybody in my generation is facing this. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, though I think that should change soon because I don't think there will be. I mean, online writing is also print. I mean, in the sense you are writing, it's just words, right? I mean, one comes in on a paper, the other comes on a screen. But the basic act of reporting is writing. So I mean, I hope that gets rectified soon with online taking over.
You know what's worrying? Everybody here who asked questions said they used to be a journalist.
Yeah, I know. It's quite worrying and very short, very short stints also.
Sir, so very sorry to interrupt, but Saikat sir had
sure.
another
Thank you.
session.
Yeah. Thanks so much. Thank you, audience, for sitting through and being participative. Thanks very much.
So we would like to extend our gratefulness and thank you for all the speakers for being here. So that ends our session. Thank you so much, sir.